What's going on, family? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening? How y'all feeling? How y'all doing? How you people in them doing? What's up? What's up? Hop on in. Hop on in. We give the people a little time to join while we find the fam. I'm waving at everybody as you come in. What's happening, fam? How y'all doing? Man, it's been a long time since I've been on the Witness Live. IG Live. What's happening, fam? How y'all doing? How y'all doing? Wave back at me. Tell me what's up. Tell me what's up. I see people coming in while we wait for the good Reverend Dr. Jemar Tisby to hop on and join us. I'm just waving at you. Howdy, Christ 2010 grad. What's happening? Hope y'all doing good. Hope y'all doing good.
No.
Oh, that man came on singing. Hold up. So see, this is different. See, you can just hop on. This feels like a violation of my boundaries. You can just hop on without any sort of like. I didn't even see you were gonna hop on or anything.
Said you invited me, so the invitation went out. You might have forgot, but I didn't.
So yes, I did invite you, but I didn't say you could actually get in.
Oh, I think the invitation was the key. See, just like Jesus invites all to come, when he gives the invitation, comes with the key. See, you don't have to RSVP for the heavenly banquet. Your invitation is your confirmation. Amen?
Hold up. Okay, so number one, before you get too far down your sermon, Allie says you were singing Destiny's Child when you came in. I couldn't hear you. You were singing Destiny's Child?
Yes, I was. You be singing no.
Okay.
I don't know why. It just
popped
in my head. I always got a song not far from my lips. So yeah.
Okay, and then Keith said you wearing the Mercedes F1 shirt.
Yes.
So I gotta acknowledge.
Yes.
I gotta
acknowledge
the F1.
P5 and P7 for the Mercedes team in Japan. Not the result we were looking for, but we had that dope chrome helmet. I know you all saw. So yes.
Jamar, before we get into what we're talking about today, number one, how you doing? What's happening, fam?
Oh man, I had a really great day. Got some writing in. It was a great start to a Monday, and it's the first time I've been feeling myself since I had a cold. It was like my first cold since before the pandemic, because the masks were good not only to block COVID, but to block a cold. So that took me out, but finally feeling better and back to myself. How about you, brother? What you up to?
It's been a day, man. It's been a day, but we here. We here, man. Monday's typically my off day, but I'm spending it with you. So spend it with you and the good listeners, the good people, the good people at the Witness. You see my voice cracking. The good people at the Witness. The good people. And then okay, so number two. So that was number one. How you doing? Greetings and God blesses. Number two. Tell them where we're going to be this weekend, because the people, it's still not clicking for the people.
Snap. No, the people
got
to know.
It's not clicking.
Y'all, we are going to be in the city of brotherly love, Philly, Philadelphia. You know what it is. This is our first time doing a live show there. So if you come, you're going to be part of history. You are going to be history makers. And I'm so looking forward to Pass the Mic, the experience where, you know, this energy is great through a screen, but when we get together in person, it's just something else, something on a different level.
Yeah. So please, y'all, go ahead and go get y'all tickets for this Saturday. I'm telling y'all, if you anywhere near, if you drivable distance in the Philly area, it's gonna be that family reunion feel, that kickback feel. We got some special surprises for you. Some special guests that are gonna be rolling through, so you don't want to miss it.
I don't even know who these
members of the team. Yeah, you do. Don't play with me. Members of the team that you weren't
ain't told me
expecting.
nothing. Tyler said, "Show up this time, this place, and then we'll see what happens."
You the blue check verified guy now, so you know I got
on some real stuff though. I don't even know what airport to fly into, because if I fly straight into Philly, it's like 3 times as much. And then they got flights that go into like LaGuardia or something, and I'm like, I don't understand East Coast geography.
Yeah, it's different. That's why I stick to the South. Everything pretty straight, pretty clear, like exactly what you're supposed to be doing.
You know where you're supposed to go.
Exactly. Well, okay, so we about to get into it with Kirk Franklin, his Father's Day documentary in advance of his album that's coming out next weekend. and we've been talking back and forth in the group chat, and we've been having some dialogues about it. And we're saying, hey, we kind of want to share this with the people and just share what really took over the 35 minutes that took over the Expansive Black Christian conversation over the past week, about Kirk Franklin discovering that his father was not his father. Now, let's first off, I have to make the statements and disclaimers, that we're framing this conversation from our personal reactions, but we also recognize there's many layers to people who are affected, most affected, who are viewing this through the lens of having the same experience, having a similar experience. I was actually talking to my father about it because, he was in a very similar experience with Kirk Franklin. That ended differently, but was in a very similar experience of kind of the questions about whether or not his father was actually his father, and then not knowing him, but not knowing him, just all these different things that are layers. And he's talked about that a little bit on the pod. So we totally understand. Also, we want to let you know two things. We're going to have more conversations about this when the album comes out. So we want to see what he says on the album, if he goes any deeper or if he talks about things deeper. So we're going to have more conversations on the pod afterwards. So if you're looking for more perspectives, different perspectives, we'll have that afterwards. But then also, it is an invitation for you all to please, if you have any thoughts, we know the Black Christian crew has the thoughts. If you have any thoughts, please email us at The Witness and go to thewitnessbcc.com. We want to post your article. We want to share your thoughts and share your perspectives.
Yeah,
so Jay,
right about your experience, especially folks who, have searches for their parents, have experienced some sort of, adoption kind of story, whatever it might be. What is the best way? Is it still submit at thewitnessbcc.com?
Submit at thewitnessbcc.com. Holler at us.
Dope.
You'll get a response. Bear with us, but holler at us and you will get a response. So Jay, when did you know this was a thing? Was I the person that put you on? I know I'd be putting you on to everything. I feel like I'd be putting you on to all the good stuff.
You the young buck here who's got his finger on the pulse of culture. Now, you texted me like last week about it, and I had heard about it. It was one of these things where I was just scrolling through. I hadn't paused. I hadn't watched it yet. And so when you mentioned it, I was like, okay, I need to sit down and make this a priority. So I heard about it. I followed Kirk Franklin on socials and all that. And then every reaction that I saw was just like the extreme, just so emotional, so affected by it. So,
what was interesting was I actually got hit to this a little bit earlier. And the reason I got hit to it was, I was following his post, and I saw in his post that he said something to the effect of Father's Day will never be the same. And people were asking questions like, what's going on? Like, what's happening? And so, I didn't know what it was leading to. But then he said, oh, meet us this Friday, or I believe it was this Friday at that point, and I'm going to share more of this story. So at first I was like, is he about to admit something? Is something going on? You just never know in these particular sectors. And I've never met someone who's grown up in church, and especially those who are, church leaders, ministry leaders, who isn't doing the most. We always doing the most, right? I just feel like
there's always
we're going to make it like a sermon point. It's dramatic. We announcing the announcement. And so when you first watch the documentary, just with what personally hit you, what were some of the things that just personally hit you when you watched the documentary?
I've got 4 things, and we'll probably get to 3 of them in the conversation. One was the documentary style. I'm just always looking at the technical aspects, how they use visual elements, auditory elements to weave a story together to make an impression. I thought it was very well done, very interesting choices in overall. Number 2, can we talk about Kirk's muscles? I mean, this man, like he's been fit
very strong,
for
man.
a minute,
He's strong,
but he was looking in tip-top shape. We always talk about like Kevin Hart and his exercise. I think Kirk Franklin needs to be, I don't know if he's been in men's fitness or what, but come on, share these treasures, Kirk. That's two. Number
Yeah, he is.
three.
Yeah, he yoked. He yoked for real, and not he equally yoked, not unequally yoked. He equally yoked.
I need to get on his fitness plan, whatever it might be. And then three, Tyler, last recording retreat, me, you and Bo were kind of joking around about how I don't emote that much. Like I'm not that emotionally expressed. I certainly don't cry very often. And I held it together in this documentary, but I lost it at two moments. The first, of course, is Kirk meeting his father, and specifically the point where they hugged, where they embraced for the first time. Lost it a little bit there. The second moment, which I was unprepared for, when I really lost it, was when he began to reconcile with his son, because that I could relate to. That I'm a father of a son. That I stayed up at night and prayed about and thought about is like my relationship with my son, and to see them really at first be so combative, at least the son toward Kirk, and then getting the news, and then he just broke, and then that when he touched his son's face, oh man, forget it. Yeah, so those are initial impressions. Like I said, we'll dive deeper into a few of them, but what kind of initial reaction did you have when you watched it?
Man, yeah, I echo everything that you said. I think number one is just how hard it is to actually live in grace and truth when you're a Christian public figure.
Ooh, public.
It's just so hard to be able when all these eyeballs. And so the first thing that kind of moved my heart was my heart moved and went out to Kirk and his family for having to navigate this. And number one, to navigate this and still produce, right? So it's navigating the personal and then also producing the art that we'll all consume and pick apart and critique. But the motivation and the place from which you're writing and the place from which you're composing and the place from which you're putting these things together is this deep, deep pain. And so actually later, I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that and kind of how you're processing. You're even figuring things out versus how much you share versus not, because you are a public figure in that regard. I think also I was really moved by the reconciliation with his son for sure, or I should say the beginnings of reconciliation with his son. Right. I don't think that's a one-time scenario, especially if you know the backstory. But also, man, I was really moved by how fraught, and this is how it's always going to be with me because I'm always going to watch this, the intergenerational dynamics between him and his parents. I was just always I was moved by that because I'm always watching for the ways in which the church and our faith has really ill-equipped and prepared us to build generational bridges and to talk in generational ways to get past certain things that we've perpetuated upon each other. And I have such a limited knowledge of what's going on. I only know as much as he's showing us.
Right.
So I don't know from different perspectives and what have you. So that's why I'm not making broad pronouncements and statements upon certain family members and things like that. I just don't know where this comes from. I don't know where they've been from.
So are you talking mainly like his parents and him, that intergenerational dynamic? And then you add his kid. So you got
like
three generations.
All the above, like kind of working together, really it moved me, and it really caused me to ask some hard questions about, as someone who has and has been open on the podcast about difficult relationship with parental figures, right? Myself, how reconciliation and forgiveness and all these things kind of play into finding yourself in your true identity, which for someone who doesn't know their biological father and is trying to navigate that betrayal is something we can't even speak to because it's just so heavy to consider. But I do think that level of what the church has perpetuated upon us. He said something interesting. He said, people only saw me when I was at the piano. When I learned how to play really well, that's when people saw me. And it's kind of the story of many of us in Black church circles that we're only seen as visible and viable according to the gifts that we have to be
And
used.
he even said if he could talk to his 20-year-old self, he would said your identity is separate or apart from your gifts and your skills. That your abilities, your talents were never supposed to be so closely tied to how you thought of yourself. And
Yep.
that all makes sense. It's full circle with the only times he truly felt seen were when he was performing, when he was exhibiting his skills. And how many pastors are like that, right? Like
Oh yeah.
it's, it's very impactful when it's a music minister who's in front of folks all the time, influential in the church. It's also, it seems like even a different level for a pastor who's preaching God's word, who tends to be the personality that folks, especially Black folks, right? When we talk about our churches, a lot of times the folks will say, I go to such and such church with so and so pastor. Like the pastor is
Mm-hmm.
so wrapped up in the identity of the church, but if the pastor's
Geronimo Jones,
identity,
MDiv is my pastor.
bishop, prophet,
Right.
whatever,
Right. Of
right?
course.
And
Yeah.
but when the
It can be
pastor's
super
identity,
unhealthy, man. It can be so
exactly,
unhealthy.
if your gifts are so wrapped up, if your identity is so wrapped up in your gifts and your skills and what you present to people, then when those things go up or down, so does your self-esteem, so does your self-perception. Anyway, yeah, just to amen what you were saying.
I think, man, it is, my therapist always talks about this, the level of work you have to do internally in relationship to the platform
Wow,
and the
that's
level
right.
to which God has given you influence with people.
That's right.
And there's a level to which I think many of us, hopefully, while we may not have his personal experience, have been encouraged to take much more vigilant care of ourselves as those who are stewarding a platform and also stewarding our own discovery and identity and healing. Uh, I want you to talk a little bit about, and some people know about this, maybe some people don't, but Kirk and Carry On had, his oldest son had falling out very publicly. And the falling out was based upon violent threats that Kirk had made and some things of that nature that had been leaked by his son. Can you talk a little bit about the level of forgiveness there and reconciliation there, but also the honesty to say we're trying to work through this,
Mm,
and acknowledgement on both sides. That was a heavy
it was a
moment, but
heavy
I think it
moment.
was also like a little. That was the one part that I kind of cringed on, not in a negative way. I just kind of cringed and said, I don't know if we should see this. It
Mm,
was one of those things where I'm
mm,
like, I
mm.
understand everybody signed a waiver and everything, but I don't know if we should see this particular portion. That's beautiful for it to exhibit the hope, but it's almost like I wish that would have been even more
Private.
private
Yeah.
than what it
Yeah.
was, right?
So, I mean, am I understanding this right? Like, this was the first time he had a sort of behind the scenes documentary effort going, but it was related to the album.
Yes.
And the timing just so happened that all this was going down where he's finding out about it.
Yes.
And so he said, okay, we're going to record this as well, right? Because
Yes.
that was one of the
Absolutely.
questions I've had is like, how do you capture him getting a swab for the DNA
Right.
test? Like, he couldn't have known when that was going to go down. So, I mean, I think you're right, because what you're pointing out is we were privy to a truly sacred and tender moment, several of them, throughout
Right.
that. And one of the things that occurred to me was he wouldn't have been able to do it. And I think he did it responsibly. He wouldn't have been able to do it, nor would he have been able to do it responsibly if he wasn't 53 years old and having been in the limelight for 30 years,
Mm.
like he's navigated some of these things. So I wouldn't advise it probably for folks who are younger, who don't have as much experience. But that moment with his son, I mean, there's few things that inspire as much self-doubt in you as parenting. And then I think there's
Mm.
something, fathers to sons, mothers to daughters, there's a similarity there that the friction causes even a higher level of concern, if there is any, right? And there always is. And so, I mean, there's just so many times I've reacted out of anger. I've let stress from work impact how I
Yes.
interact with my son. And I've done or said things that I'm like, that's just, he didn't deserve that, you know? And it's always his prerogative, even as a child, to forgive me. And one of the hardest
Mm,
things that I've done and am trying to do is not just say I'm sorry, which parents should do. We just should. But taking that next step and say, will you forgive me? Because that is such a vulnerable moment, because they can say justifiably
no. Yeah.
yes or no, right? And even as a child, it's their prerogative to say no. No, they're not ready for that, or they don't want to. And I have to take that because I was in the wrong, right? So to see this moment where what happened with Kirk and his son was just on 10, right? And it was public, and it was, I mean, none of us would want a microphone on, 80% of our parenting moments, right? But that's exactly what happened to him. And I was like, I was on pins and needles. I was like, I'm not sure this is going to go the way he hopes, because there
Right.
was such antagonism from walking in the door. There was already this confrontational aspect. And then when he found that and the son just broke, I honestly think he was looking for any legitimate reason to try to reestablish communication. And this just happened to be a huge
Yeah.
bombshell, but I think they both needed it, whether their pride or the pain would allow them to admit it. But I'm glad there was this opportunity. Um,
Yeah. It's funny, man, when you talk about parenting and the self-doubt that comes from it. I was recently in a stressful moment, and one of my pastors, actually my pastor, Dr. Stevenson, he FaceTimed me just randomly, as he's prone to do. And he just FaceTimed me and could tell something was bothering me. I was stressed. One of the things he said, let me remind you of a couple of things that you need to hear. And one of the things he reminded me was, do not take this out on your children.
mm,
Do not allow your stress and the pressure that you feel. Don't make them the objects of the exposing and the releasing of pressure, pain, and tension that you might feel
wow,
in this moment. You don't have a right to do that, and they don't deserve it.
good
They're
word.
your joys.
Mm-hmm,
And it was a
mm-hmm.
helpful word for me to remember. I think also, man, I think it was also really helpful for me to remember the ways in which, like, um, we as people so often do not consider the harm of our actions because we don't have time to really sit in the harm
Mm,
because we're doing so much.
we're doing so
Like we're
much, doing too
doing
much.
so much.
Yes,
Yeah. So we're doing too much and we can't really sit in the harm of our actions. And we can't sit in the harm of it. And I think for Kurt, I think this whole situation caused him to sit in it a little bit more and say, not just, oh, I need to make sure that I have this relationship with my son, but I actually need to reckon with the harm that I've created and caused. And I need to sit across from him and make myself vulnerable enough to say, I haven't done what I should do. And I know
yeah,
I prioritize some things over others. And I apologize and I'm sorry. And the vulnerability to admit that publicly, because we know it's different for us, because we know how he messed up.
right.
Like we know it, you know what I'm saying?
I'm
And it is so hard because if you don't process that type of stuff and if you don't navigate that type of stuff, it may not be to the extent to which Kurt did, but what
right.
you'll find is you'll also, as colleagues easy to say, you'll pass that down to your legacy as well.
Well, yeah, as he said in the film, he said, "Hurt." The old adage, hurt people," and it's so true. If we don't heal, then we will pass on our hurts in some way, shape, or form to those who are closest to us, even
Yeah.
without intending to. So, I mean, it just this is the true self-care, is healing. Um,
Yeah.
Whatever that looks like. And I'm glad to hear he referenced his therapist and he said, I need to talk to you. I don't care if you show up in
Yeah.
crisis. I need to come.
I need you. I said, but you identify with this, right? I know people are like, that's funny. I'm like, no, that's real.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
I need to talk to
Oh, yes.
you.
Yes.
Like, what's going on? I need to talk to you
ASAP.
today.
Let's go.
Like, make some
And
time. Make some time.
and that's good and that's healthy that we have people like that in our lives, particularly trained people, right? Like I think a lot of times we substitute a good friend who may indeed be helpful, but
Yeah.
it's different when
Yeah.
somebody can hear behind what you're saying from a clinical trained perspective and sort of shepherd you through. Anyway, one of the things
Yeah.
that really got me, he seemed to have gained one parent and lost another.
Hmm.
So he gained a biological father who, at this moment, we're only 4 months removed from when all this went down. So still, they got to get to know each other, trust each other, all of that stuff. Nevertheless, there was this huge gap and this huge question, and also this huge deception that was untangled with this DNA test. And yet, his mother, his biological mother, denied two different DNA tests, one of which she was physically present for and observed. And he asked her
Yeah.
point blank. And what got me in this, they were sitting in that room, him, his aunt, and his mom. And he asked, he said, 10-year-old Kirk needs to hear this. He said, 10-year-old Kirk needs to hear this. Are you refuting the results of these two DNA tests? And she said, yes. She refuted the results of both of those tests. I cannot imagine how heartrending that must have been, because he hadn't seen his mother in what, 23 years prior
Right.
to that. And then to find out who his father is, to have it scientifically verified, and to have his mother continue in her deception. So now he's got to navigate the long lost father I never knew I had and I was lied to about, and the mother who refuses to face reality. I just,
Yeah, man. I think I feel like there's so much, and this kind of gets into like the level to which Black families have been so clandestine and cagey about information, and how what happens in the house stays in the house is so unhealthy. Because I feel like there's so much underneath the surface that we don't know, we'll never know, and frankly, we should know. And there's just this level to which I feel like there's such an underlying story. There's multiple stories underneath this. And it really reminded me of how the narratives we tell inside our homes really shape our future and shape the way in which we view ourselves. And also, this is the secondary reality, which is it was jarring to see Kurt as a teenager, because what I saw wasn't Kurt as the 53-year-old man. I saw Kurt as the 12, 13, 14-year-old. Because
yeah,
whenever he was in the presence of his family, whenever he was in the presence of his family, his whole body language changed,
yes,
right? Like his whole
bro,
body language changed, his voice changed, his everything. He looked so much, it was like he was almost shrinking in those moments because he was going back to, it's like his body remembered him
bro.
going back to
And
that time.
I first, one of the most cringy moments that stuck with me was when he called his aunt the first time, and he said, Sandra, and she said, what? And there was this awkward long pause where at first you're like, is it a bad connection? Did she not hear him? But it's this thing Black folks do. And I have been, as a teacher in the Delta, when I was brand new to the South, this happened to me all the time. You would say someone's first name, or you refer to them just by their, without the title, and they would say, excuse me, what did you say? And they wouldn't clue you in on what they wanted to hear. But it was in most of the time, it's just to show respect, right? But this, when he heard it, because of the family dynamics and the history and all of that, he had to say, you know, I know what you did. I'm not going to make a big deal of it right now. I need to move on and tell you about this. But that was one of those moments. And then when he was in the car about to go in, I think it was to his father's house, he said, I feel like a 10-year-old boy right now. And haven't we all felt that in a sense? Like if we go back to our childhood home or our parent home, right? There's this, or with our siblings or something like that. There's this sense in which you sort of fall back into your childhood self without ever intending to. And that is probably predictable and common. But if you've had a traumatic childhood, that becomes, I mean, I am impressed by this man's courage, because all of that to me would have been so paralyzing, right? It would have been, it would have been, because you would have known that feeling was coming. And for many of us, that would have been enough not to engage at all because you didn't want to feel that.
Yeah, like I don't even know, man. Like it felt so, because this is the level, right? It's one thing to be a child, it's another thing to be an adult child. And I don't even know. I think I've been trying to figure out over the past 5 years how to be a good adult son
Yeah.
and how to honor and then set boundaries. I don't know how to do it
And
yet.
and
Like this
then
is
it
y'all
gets
gonna have to
even
help me.
more.
I've been trying to figure it out. Somebody drop some wisdom. I'm in therapy for it. How are you a good, because we talked about this, like, as adults now in the stage of being concerned with and caring for those who are a generation ahead of us and loving them and wanting to protect them and care for them, and also wanting to get some necessary closure,
Right.
and also wanting to hear things that we haven't heard. And so I've been trying to figure out how can we be good adult children for those of us who, still have our parents, still blessed to have our parents. Like how do we
I'm
navigate that? Because I felt like in that moment he was almost like, it was almost like he was so in between. Like, I have all this, but I can't out achieve the need to hear this
Yes,
sentence.
yes,
Like, I have
yes,
all these
yes.
Grammys. I've sold all these albums. I cannot out achieve an underlying open gap that says, I need to hear you say this.
Right, right. He at one point said, I would trade all the trophies just to
Exactly. Just.
hear this, I absolutely believe he would. Um, and it gets so hard because even as you get older and you're trying to figure out how to be a good adult child to your parents, it very, very quickly switches, oftentimes unexpectedly, that you actually have to start taking care of your parents as
You
they
have to
get
parent,
elderly.
almost like parenting,
So,
parenting. Yeah.
yeah, whether just for their physical or their financial or their emotional, and I'm no therapist, so seek a professional. But I was in a session once, and my therapist asked me, you know, um, picture 10-year-old Jemar. What would you say to him to affirm
See, I don't know who your
him?
therapist is, but like it's getting spooky. Like, I don't know who your therapist is,
The
but my
same thing they
therapist
told
did the same
you?
thing with me,
Uh-huh.
and
Listen, it,
it didn't end well.
oh,
Okay, like it didn't end
wow.
well.
Yeah, yeah.
It was snot and all kinds of other stuff. Like, honestly, man, like I didn't know how to respond to that.
I know. I know. That's one of the things that, so you're talking about being a good adult child. I think it begins with healing our inner child. Um,
Mm,
healing our inner child of the wounds our
mm,
loving parents oftentimes never intended to create. And I know I'm
mm.
creating them right now for my own child, but somebody's got to parent that child who we once were.
Man.
and
That's good,
fill
bro.
in the gaps of what we didn't get. And I think that that is healing for all of our relationships, because until we get that healing, particularly from those childhood wounds, we're not going to be able to love ourselves well, which I think is so missing in this conversation. Love your neighbor what? As yourself. We
Yourself
always
as
skip
you,
over that part,
as you
even if
love
we give lip
yourself.
surface to it. We don't love ourselves well if we're not healing our inner child. And we need help with that, and it takes time, and we'll never do it perfectly. But I think that is the journey to health and healing that then allows us to have healthy relationships with parents, with children, with brothers and sisters, with colleagues and co-workers, with church members, et cetera, et cetera. If we haven't loved ourselves well and our childhood selves well, how can we love others?
And again, we're saying this again, and that's so wise, bro. We're saying this again as people who are not
On the
in the
way,
most
bro.
affected we are not in the most affected
Mm-hmm.
category. So we don't even know what this feels like for people who've experienced it. But just on a baseline level, it reminded me you cannot outachieve your healing. There's just nothing you can do. And I
Come
remember
on.
you said this. I remember you said this in the Color of Compromise book study, and which everybody should go get. But the Color of Compromise book study, you said this in the video. You said, I know a lot of people are gonna say, oh, this is critical race theory, social justice, this is whatever, so I'm not gonna fool with it. You're gonna deny history. And you looked at the camera, you simply said, it's here when you're ready. It's here when you're ready. Whenever you're ready, it's here. We're here. It's here when you're ready. And I feel like there's a level to which all of us have to realize that no matter how much we achieve and accomplish, it's going to be ready. It's going to be ready for us. And we're going to have to face it. And if we don't, we're actually ending up, we're not avoiding it, even if we don't face it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
We're not avoiding
yeah.
it.
Yeah, it's still
Like it's
there.
coming out.
Right.
It's coming out in some way, shape, or form.
Absolutely.
And seeing him kind of reckon with that and wrestle with that, but also and then I know we're kind of winding down here, but I do want to say, man, and this is me as a pastor, the church, like we've got to equip people to navigate this. Like we have to support people in navigating this, and we ourselves, which I think, and this is a big thing. Someone mentioned it a little bit earlier about the difference between piggybacking off of what you said, the difference between actual trained professionals and kind of like grassroots, like therapy, like grassroots, like advice and counsel. That I think starts with a lot of pastors like myself saying, you know what, I'm limited here. I
Yes.
reach my cap.
Yes. Yes. Man.
I can encourage you. I can show up for you. I can pray with you. I can sit with you. But when it gets down into diving into what's going on, I'm going to need to refer you to a professional that's been trained at this, knows what they're doing, going to see things, 1,000 things I cannot see. I'm going to need you to get in
100%.
therapy. And I can reveal certain things because when you're in the word is a two-edged sword. It's going to reveal certain
Yes.
things.
Yes.
But once we get down to actually dealing with it, I'm going to pray and sit with you and walk with you while someone else helps you to unpack and unlearn all the things that I can't even see.
I'll say this, because I've been so wounded by churches, the preachers who are ministering to me the most, I'm talking about online or in person, are the ones who speak of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. They're the ones who get down.
Ooh.
They speak to our woundedness. They speak to our insecurities. They speak to our personal self-doubt and need for comfort. I think when we hear the Holy Spirit as our great comforter, if we can visualize Jesus literally sidling up next to us, putting his arm around us, letting us lean on his shoulder and cry it out, pray it out, talk it out, whatever we need. That's the Jesus, which is why there's so many of us teachers of the word in whatever capacity. We sort of major on the judgment, we major on the prophetic, we major on the exhortational. But what about the comfort? The comfort of the gospel. That is what I think turns heart of stone into heart of flesh.
Hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? I mean, you've
My,
gone
my,
there.
my,
You go there. I know you do. I've heard it,
bro.
but I just think that's where we
My,
are as a
my.
people.
My. I was reading Parker Palmer's
Yeah.
book, Let Your Light Speak,
Okay.
and
He's good on that.
he said a line. He said, "What a long time it can take for us to become who we've always been."
Let me
Like
listen.
what a long time it can take for us to become who we've always been. You know,
That's
and he was
the
speaking about
journey, bro.
the internal voice of who we are, and our soul speaking the direction we're supposed to go in. But man, I was thinking, I was like, man, you know what? All the homiletics in the world and all the theological acumen in the world, great as it may be, helpful as it may be. I mean, we just had an episode that came out about preaching, which you should go check
Was it
out, by
dope?
the way, Pastor Mike,
Yes.
wherever podcasts are, wherever podcasts are played. But I feel like all that like takes a backseat to just simply saying there's a beauty in finding yourself, and there's a beauty in finding your authentic self, and there's a beauty in refusing to wear the mask of what people have expected you to be, and the things you ought to do, and the people you ought to be, and being your authentic self. And I think that good church community and
Yeah.
healthy preaching and safe pastoring should welcome you into it. And
I
I think it's just so important, man, that we create that table and create the conditions for people to hear, I'm becoming who I've always been,
That's
and to
beautiful.
walk in that, and be safe on that journey.
I mean, I just have two thoughts. One is that God has implanted in us a spark, a uniqueness, a calling, and an identity that's there from the beginning. And so it's less about finding finding who you are outside of yourself and figuring that out, and more
Yeah,
about
bro.
returning to yourself.
Yeah,
You know,
bro. Yeah.
just as we have these childhood wounds that need healing, we also have these childhood dreams and proclivities and
Yeah.
joys that were there before the concerns of the world choked them out like weeds and thorns, right? And so much of our lives as adults is pulling back those weeds and discovering that seedling that was there, when we were children. So
Yeah.
that's one thought, is that, the answers that we're searching for, the identities that we're searching for, are not found out there externally. Those can sometimes help and point us, but they're really already there. And what we need to do is uncover that. And then the second thing is, what a gift, a gracious gift, because we weren't privileged to this, for him to tell his story, Kirk Franklin, for him to share it, you know, because it's sparking conversations like this, because
Yeah.
many people can see their own experiences in his, wherever your entry point is, there's something for people, um, to latch on to. And at the Joy and Justice Conference, I talked about our sacred scars. And
Yeah,
this
that
is
mug that joint a classic. It's a classic, by the way. It's a
well, it's just so
classic.
interesting
Triple
because
platinum.
that means a lot coming from a preacher's preacher like you. Um, but Kirk was doing two things. He was sharing his scars from 6 decades of life, but also there's like new wounds and wounds being reopened in the telling of it, in the process of discovering who his biological father is, going through the drama with his mother, with his son. Um, I hope it speaks to a level of spiritual and emotional maturity that he can handle that. Time will tell. But at the same
Yeah.
time, it tells you the power of testimony. It tells you the power of our witness is what it can evoke in other people, because it's the truth in me speaking to the truth in you. But if my truth never speaks to your truth, we'll never have that experience or that resonance.
Yeah, I do want to go back to something I believe it's Abby said about circling back to the conversation. Absolutely. At the beginning, we mentioned that after the album comes out next week, we definitely want to have a more extensive conversation on the podcast rather than just kind of reacting, but have a deeper dive. So 1000% we hear you, and definitely want to have a deeper dive into this, because there's so many different layers. I feel like we could, and it's like weird because you don't want to do like a series on it. It's like somebody else's life. That was always weird when people whenever Leave Loud would happen. And
people
were like writing writing blogs about reaction to Tyler Burns' story. I'm like, what? I was like, that's so weird, but it is important because there's so many entryways that thing. So I definitely hear you, and we definitely want to have more conversations.
I think
after the album
the
comes
simplest thing to do would just be to get Kirk on the podcast. Then he can tell his own story.
You speaking confidently like you got juice like that.
I know he's listening right now, or he's going to listen to the replay.
You're right.
So
we should stop doing that. I should stop doing that.
So Kirk, hey,
listening
brother,
right now. Come on,
you're welcome on the platform anytime, brother. We would love to chop it up with you. Yeah.
Nah, man. But you know how black folks do, man. I ain't gonna hold you on this phone. Ain't that the way that we in?
I ain't gonna hold you
on this phone.
I ain't gonna hold you.
I ain't gonna hold you on this phone, man.
If anybody's got to connect to Kirk Franklin, let us know. We will make that happen.
You already put it out there like he was coming on. So now people gonna run with it. They're gonna be hounding us when the episode dropping, like what's going on.
Hey, as long as an assistant walks up to him, Kirk goes to his assistant like, hey, what's this? I've been hearing about these young brothers want me on the Pastor Mike podcast. I don't have it on my schedule, on my calendar here. Can you work on that for me? You never know how these things
silly, man. You silly, man. Well, once again, everybody, thank you for joining us. This is what we call behind the mic. So I didn't even frame it like that. But it's what we call behind the mic. So this is kind of where we hop on IG. It's been a minute since we've done it. You silly. It's been a minute since we've done it. We should probably do it a little bit more. But thank y'all so much for tuning in. Reminder, we're going to be in Philly this Saturday. So get
September
your tickets.
30th.
Anywhere in drivable distance to Philly. Please get to Philly. I'm telling y'all, it's going to be special. So I love y'all. Jay, thank you so much for taking some time out, man.
Anytime, my brother. Anytime, my brother.
All right, fam.
Take us
We'll see y'all. Oh, no, I ain't taking y'all with nothing. I ain't taking y'all with nothing. You're going to have to sing us out. Go ahead. I'll transfer the host privilege.
I don't know enough of the lyrics to do that. I was just hum along.
See,
I'm
fam.
holler at you.
All right, fam. Peace.